10 years of unpaid overtime, forgotten birthdays, and missed family dinners, and still, the only reward they offered was more work without a thank you. I sat at my desk long after the office had emptied, the faint hum of the fluorescent lights overhead blending with the tapping of my keyboard. The streetlights outside flickered to life, casting long shadows across the cracked asphalt of the narrow street. From the window, I could see the trees lining Main Street, already tinged with gold and crimson, their leaves beginning to carpet the sidewalks in a vivid tapestry. Another Vermont fall was settling in, cool and inevitable. As I glanced around the office, the tired posters about teamwork and loyalty stared back at me with faded conviction. My name was nowhere on the Employee of the Month wall. It never had been, not once in a decade. Still, here I was, finalizing quarterly reports Monica Grafton needed for tomorrow's leadership meeting, reports she'd likely skim without a second thought. A soft knock sounded behind me. Turn in, I saw Kelsey Hart, the young receptionist, peeking around the corner, a paper bag in hand. "I grabbed you a turkey sandwich from Maple Brew before they closed," she said, a little breathless. "You missed lunch again." I smiled warmly, touched by the gesture. "Thank you, Kelsey. You didn't have to." She shrugged. "You're always here. Figured you could use something before you turned into a ghost." I chuckled and promised I'd eat soon, waving her off so she could go enjoy her evening. Once she left, I sat for a moment longer, staring at the blinking cursor on my screen. Somewhere along the way, I had mistaken being needed for being valued. A soft chime from my phone distracted me. It was a text from Ben Carter, the IT guy I sometimes chatted with in the break room. He'd left a sticky note on my monitor earlier with a simple message: "Don't forget, life is more than work." I sighed and packed up for the night, cradling the lukewarm turkey sandwich in one hand and my laptop bag in the other. On my way out, I noticed Monica's door slightly ajar. Light spilled into the hallway, and I caught a glimpse of her leather portfolio open on the desk, lists and charts scrawled inside. One document in particular had a name circled at the top: mine. The next morning, the office buzzed more than usual. I barely had time to set down my coffee from Maple Brew, black, no sugar, just like always, before Monica summoned me into her office with a clipped tone. She greeted me with a tight smile, motioning for me to sit across from her massive mahogany desk. The same desk she never hesitated to remind us had once belonged to her father, the company's founder. "I'll get straight to the point, Elise," she began, folding her manicured hands over a glossy folder. "Given your years of dedication, we'd like to offer you a new role." I blinked, caught off guard. "Promotion after all this time?" "You'd take over managing internal operations alongside your current client load," Monica continued. "A chance to broaden your skill set, prepare for future leadership." I waited, heart thudding. No mention of salary adjustment, no change in title, no bonuses or even additional vacation days, just more work, as if loyalty alone was payment enough. "I hope you'll see this for the opportunity it is," she said, that practiced corporate smile still painted on her face. "Think of it as a testament to your dedication." I nodded mechanically, murmuring a non-committal, "I'll think about it," before gathering my things and stepping back into the corridor, where the scent of old carpeting and burnt coffee filled the air. My thoughts swirled in confusion and resentment. Outside, the afternoon had faded into a dusky, chilled evening. The lamplights along the street buzzed faintly, illuminating the scattering of fallen leaves like small fires against the sidewalk. I held my paper coffee cup close to my chest for warmth, feeling a quiet ache begin to grow in the hollow of my chest. I passed the glass case in the lobby on my way out. Inside were plaques and trophies, achievements of employees past, glowing under the fluorescent lights. My own efforts, years of missed dinners, weekends spent at my desk, had never made it there. Maybe loyalty wasn't about waiting for someone to recognize your worth. Maybe it was about recognizing when your loyalty was costing you more than it was giving back. I left the office that evening carrying not pride, but a silent, growing ache. Sometimes loyalty feels less like a virtue and more like a leash. The next morning, I sat by the window at Maple Brew Cafe, my black coffee cool and untouched beside me. Outside, the town of Burlington stirred to life, the early autumn air carrying a crispness that hinted at colder days ahead. Leaves skittered across the sidewalks, chasing each other like playful children. Somewhere down the street, the bells of St. Paul's Cathedral chimes the hour, 9 o'clock. I stared out at the world I'd missed while tethered to my desk for a decade. Across the table, Rachel Moore stirred cream into her coffee, watching me with that patient look she reserved for people she cared about, but knew needed a nudge. "You're thinking yourself into a corner again," she said gently. I shook my head. "I don't know how to walk away, Rach. 10 years, it's not just a job anymore, it's part of my history." Rachel leaned back, sipping her coffee. "Elise, loyalty is earned, not owed. Staying out of habit isn't the same as staying for the right reasons." I smiled weakly. I knew she was right. Rachel had left Grafton Solutions 3 years ago after realizing she was chasing promises that would never materialize. She had warned me, but I'd stayed. I told myself things would change, that patience would pay off. "Maybe I'm just scared," I admitted. "Scared that all those years will mean nothing if I leave." Rachel's voice softened. "They don't mean nothing. They shaped you, but they don't have to trap you." As I mulled over her words, a familiar figure shuffled into Maple Brew, bundled in a worn wool coat and a Red Sox cap pulled low over his white hair. Mr. Marvin. He spotted me, smiled, and lifted his coffee cup in greeting before settling near the window. I hadn't seen Marvin since he retired last winter, nudged quietly into early retirement when he struggled with the company's new digital systems. I remembered how he had once ruled the office with jokes and an endless supply of peppermints, and how, when things started shifting too fast for him, the management had simply moved on. One afternoon, long before he left, I'd stayed late to help him transfer client files to the new system. No one had asked me to. Marvin hadn't either. It had just seemed like the right thing to do. As I watched him now, content with his newspaper and cinnamon bun, his earlier words echoed in my mind. Sometimes the best thing you can do is leave before they forget you altogether. Rachel nudged my hand across the table. "Maybe it's time to start remembering your worth," she said quietly. I breathed in the scent of pumpkin spice and old wood, the smell of a small-town cafe readying itself for the busy day ahead. The thought of walking away terrified me, but staying after what Monica had offered, staying might hollow me out completely. "I think you're right," I said finally, feeling the first fragile crack in the shell of fear that had kept me bound to Grafton for so long. Rachel grinned. "Of course I'm right. I've been waiting 3 years to hear you say it." We laughed softly, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something close to relief. That afternoon, I wandered the streets aimlessly, letting the brisk autumn air clear my mind. Shop windows displayed Halloween decorations, jack-o'-lanterns grinning through spider webs, strings of orange lights coiled like friendly serpents. Life outside Grafton seemed vivid, real, something I had been missing for far too long. Later, back at my apartment, I sat cross-legged on my worn couch, laptop balanced on my knees. I stared at the blinking cursor of a blank document longer than I cared to admit. My resume hadn't been updated in a decade. How did you summarize 10 years of invisible labor? It wasn't about anger. I wasn't furious at Monica or the company. I was exhausted from giving so much and receiving so little in return. With slow, deliberate keystrokes, I began to type job titles, client successes, project wins, small victories that had once felt insignificant but now painted a picture of someone capable, someone worthy. When I finally hit Save As, naming the file simply Elise Walker Resume, a strange exhilaration buzzed through me. It wasn't just a document, it was a declaration. That night, for the first time in 10 years, I dusted off my old resume and hit Save As. Sometimes the biggest betrayals come with a smile and a handshake. Monday morning arrived wrapped in a gray mist that seemed to seep into everything: streets, sidewalks, even the stiff collars of business jackets. I parked my car in the cracked lot behind Grafton Solutions, gripping my coffee like a lifeline as I steeled myself for the conversation I knew I could no longer avoid. Inside, the fluorescent lights flickered against the aged carpet, and a hollow echo followed each of my steps down the hallway. No one met my eyes. It was unusual, and I felt the tension tightening across my shoulders as I made my way toward the small conference room where Monica had asked me to meet her. I passed the display case again, the one with the company awards from decades past, and noticed a fine layer of dust on the glass. It felt fitting somehow. Monica stood near the window when I entered, arms folded, her tailored blazer a stark blue against the gloomy morning light. On the table was a single sheet of paper and a manila envelope. No welcoming smile, no formalities. "Elise," she said coolly, "have a seat." I remained standing. "I've considered your response, or rather, your lack of enthusiasm for the opportunity offered," she continued, each word crisp, rehearsed. "It's clear your commitment to Grafton Solutions is not where it needs to be for a leadership role." I said nothing. There was nothing to say. We both knew this was a formality. Monica picked up the envelope and extended it toward me. "Effective immediately, your employment with Grafton Solutions is terminated." The world didn't tilt. The floor didn't give way beneath me. If anything, I felt lighter. "I'll have someone escort you to collect your belongings," Monica said, her voice devoid of any real emotion. I took the envelope without a word. My fingers barely trembled. As I stepped into the hallway, I caught a glimpse of Ben Carter hovering by the IT department's door, his face tight with something between sympathy and resignation. Kelsey stood frozen at her desk, her mouth parted as if she might say something. But the weight of the office silence pressed down on everyone. I offered a small nod to both of them. No dramatics, no final speeches. Dignity, I told myself. Dignity above all. Back at my desk, the packing process felt strangely impersonal. A few framed photos, a small potted plant wilting at the edges, and a battered notepad filled with a decade of scribbled ideas and meeting notes. The heaviest thing was a simple nameplate, Elise Warren, Client Manager. The letters had faded over the years, just like my sense of belonging. I placed the nameplate in the box last, setting it gently atop the others. The security guard assigned to escort me was new. I didn't even know his name. He kept a respectful distance as I gathered my things and headed for the door, the cardboard box balanced against my hip. The lobby felt cavernous as I walked through it for the final time. The scent of overbrewed coffee and lemony floor cleaner mingled in the air. No one stopped me. No one tried to say goodbye. Outside, the autumn air bit into my cheeks, bracing and sharp. The mist had thickened into a light drizzle, coating the parked cars in a fine sheen. I pulled my coat tighter, breathing in the damp scent of wet pavement and fallen leaves. At my car, I placed the box carefully on the back seat, pausing for a moment to look at the few things that represented 10 years of my life. A framed photo from the company holiday party long ago, a ballpoint pen with the company logo cracked at the edges, a thank you card from a client whose account I had saved years before, 10 years boiled down to a single cardboard box. The ache I expected didn't come. Instead, a strange clarity settled over me, quiet and resolute. I didn't belong there anymore. Maybe I never truly had. As I tightened my coat against the crisp autumn air, my phone buzzed, a message from a number I didn't recognize. "We should meet." "Some doors don't close behind you, they open ahead." I stared at the message on my phone, heart thudding louder than it should have. In the chill of the morning, with my life packed into a single cardboard box, the last thing I expected was an invitation, especially not from a number I didn't recognize. For a long moment, I simply stood there, letting the drizzle beat against my coat, before tapping out a cautious reply. "Available afternoon." "Where?" The answer came quickly. "North Bay Solutions." 2 p.m. reception desk. I knew North Bay, of course. Anyone working in marketing within 50 miles did. They were the ones who handled the biggest accounts, the kind Grafton Solutions used to dream of landing. I didn't dare to believe they were reaching out to offer anything more than polite curiosity. Maybe they needed a freelance consultant. Maybe they were just being kind. Still, hope unfurled inside me, like the stubborn crocus that pushes through frost in early spring. I spent the late morning combing through my closet for something suitable. Most of my work clothes were practical rather than impressive, but I settled on a navy blue dress and a soft gray blazer, the ones I'd worn to my last major client pitch. As I pinned my hair back, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. There were faint lines at the corners of my eyes now, small markers of all the late nights and long weekends I'd given to people who would forget me within days. Maybe it was time to remember myself. By the time I pulled into the parking garage beneath the sleek glass tower that housed North Bay Solutions, the drizzle had turned to a cold but steady rain. I clutched my resume folder against my chest and hurried into the lobby, where warmth and the scent of polished wood greeted me. At the front desk, a smiling receptionist handed me a visitor's badge without asking for my name. "They're expecting you," she said. The elevator ride to the 10th floor felt like ascending into another world. Gone were the faded posters and worn carpeting of Grafton Solutions. Here, the floors gleamed, the walls displayed tasteful local art, and clusters of employees chatted in open lounges over coffee that smelled genuinely good. When the elevator doors opened, Daniel Everett was already there, extending his hand before I could step out. "Elise Warren," he said warmly. "I'm glad you could come." Daniel was in his early 50s with silver at his temples and laugh lines around his eyes that suggested a man who had lived a little and learned from it. There was an easy confidence about him, a welcome contrast to the polished coldness I had grown used to. "Thank you for reaching out," I said, shaking his hand firmly. "Let's grab a coffee and talk," he suggested, leading me through a maze of cozy workstations and collaborative spaces. Once seated in a sunlit corner with steaming mugs before us, Daniel leaned back and studied me for a moment, not assessing, not judging, just seeing. "I heard about what happened at Grafton," he said eventually, his tone careful. I nodded, choosing honesty. "It was time." Daniel smiled slightly. "Good, because we were hoping it would be." At my puzzled expression, he chuckled and leaned forward. "3 months ago, Marvin told me you might be looking for a change." I blinked. "Marvin? Mr. Marvin?" He nodded. "He spoke highly of you, not just about your skills, but about your kindness. He said, and I quote, 'She's the kind of person who helps without being asked and never asks for credit.' That stuck with me." Emotion rose unexpectedly in my throat. Marvin, the man everyone else had let fade into the background. He hadn't forgotten. "I didn't know," I said, voice a little rougher than I intended. "You weren't supposed to," Daniel said. "Marvin wanted it to be your choice, not an obligation." He slid a folder across the table. Inside, I found a detailed offer. Director of Client Partnerships, competitive salary, generous benefits, and, most surprising of all, a line about autonomy and trust in leadership. "This isn't just about filling a position," Daniel said. "We want people who see value in people, not just profits." I closed the folder slowly, feeling the weight of it settle in my lap. It wasn't just an offer, it was validation. "Take the weekend to think about it," Daniel said, but I already knew my answer. The best revenge isn't loud. It's living so well that the past can't reach you. By Monday morning, the leaves had deepened into shades of crimson and gold, and the air carried a sharper bite. I pulled into the parking garage beneath North Bay Solutions, feeling a peculiar mixture of nerves and anticipation. A new badge clipped to my blazer, a new title beneath my name, and a new chance to be something more than a forgotten face behind a desk. The lobby buzzed with quiet energy. People greeted each other with nods and easy smiles, a stark contrast to the hushed, wary atmosphere I'd grown used to at Grafton. Here you weren't an inconvenience for asking a question or sharing an idea. You were part of something that breathed. Daniel met me near the elevators, handing me a small welcome basket wrapped in cellophane, coffee beans from a local roaster, a journal with the North Bay logo embossed in gold, and a handwritten card. "First days deserve a little celebration," he said with a grin. I laughed, genuinely warmed. "Thank you. I can't remember the last time someone welcomed me like this." "You'll get used to it," he said, clapping my shoulder before disappearing into the morning bustle. My new office wasn't a grand corner suite. It was better. A sunlit room with real windows overlooking Church Street, a sturdy oak desk, and a comfortable chair that didn't squeak with every shift. On the wall hung a framed quote, "Leadership is about making others better as a result of your presence, and making sure that impact lasts in your absence. As I unpacked, setting my framed photos on the windowsill and my battered notepad in the drawer, my phone buzzed with a text from Ben Carter. "You won't believe this," he wrote. "Monica just called an emergency meeting. Word is North Bay dropped Grafton Solutions, total panic mode." I stared at the screen for a long moment, feeling not triumph, but a deep, settled sense of rightness. It wasn't personal, it was business. A business that Grafton had neglected while they polished their empty slogans and squeezed their employees dry. Another message arrived a few minutes later, this time from Rachel. "Celebrate tonight? You deserve it." I smiled, fingers flying over the keyboard. "Farmer's market after work? Perfect. I'll bring the pumpkin pie." Work that morning flew by in a whirlwind of introductions and briefings. My team, was a blend of seasoned professionals and bright new faces. They listened when I spoke and offered ideas without fear. When I suggested an open brainstorming session rather than a formal meeting, their enthusiasm was immediate. By lunch, I had already answered 36 emails, toured 2 departments, and outlined the first steps for a new client retention initiative. Every moment reaffirmed that I was exactly where I was meant to be. At Maple Brew Cafe across the street, I grabbed a sandwich and tipped the barista generously, savoring the easy friendliness that came with familiar places. The girl behind the counter recognized me and smiled, slipping a pumpkin cookie into my bag with a wink. "First day deserves something sweet," she said. That evening, Rachel and I strolled through the farmer's market, weaving between stalls overflowing with apples, squashes, and late-season flowers. Lanterns hung from the trees, casting a warm golden glow over the crowd. Rachel nudged me as we passed a stand selling hand-carved wooden signs. One caught my eye. "Grow where you are planted." "That feels about right," I said, grinning. We sat on a bench with our pumpkin pie slices balanced precariously on paper plates. As the sun dipped behind the spired rooftops of Burlington, a peace I hadn't felt in years settled over me. I thought of Monica and the empty halls of Grafton Solutions. I thought of Marvin, somewhere enjoying his retirement, having believed in me when few others did. And I thought of the work still ahead, real work, meaningful work, with people who saw value not just in numbers, but in people themselves. That night, as I arranged pumpkins on my windowsill, I realized I hadn't lost anything that mattered. I'd finally found what did. Not every ending is a goodbye. Sometimes it's a welcome. A week into my new role at North Bay Solutions, I found myself arriving early most mornings, not out of fear or obligation, but because I wanted to be there. The city outside the glass tower woke slowly, the morning's colder now, with mist lingering over the sidewalks, and the last stubborn leaves clinging to the trees like little scraps of fire. Inside, the office hummed with quiet purpose. People greeted each other with real smiles. The coffee was strong and hot, the conversation easy. In so many small ways, it was everything Grafton had never been. My team and I settled into a rhythm quickly. We brainstormed around whiteboards crowded with ideas, celebrated small wins with impromptu lunches, and laughed easily during our afternoon breaks. Daniel made good on his promise of autonomy, stepping in only to offer support, not micromanagement. One morning, as I sipped a steaming cup of black coffee from Maple Brew and watched the sunlight creep across my desk, Daniel stopped by with a manila envelope. "I thought you might want to see this," he said, dropping it gently onto my desk. Inside was a certificate, simple but elegant. North Bay Solutions recognized Elise Warren for outstanding leadership in client relations. I traced the embossed letters with my fingertips, a lump rising in my throat. It wasn't about the paper itself. It was about being seen, truly seen, for the first time in years. "Thank you," I said, my voice thick with gratitude. "You earned it," Daniel said simply, and left me to think. That evening, I met Rachel at Maple Brew. The cafe had transformed for Halloween. Paper bats dangled from the ceiling, and a carved pumpkin with a goofy grin sat on every table. We claimed a corner booth, sipping spiced cider and trading stories about horrible bosses and ridiculous office politics. Somewhere between laughter and cinnamon dusted conversation, Rachel leaned across the table, her expression turning more serious. You know, she said, you didn't just survive this, you changed the story. I smiled, feeling the truth of her words settle in my chest like a warm stone. I guess I did. As we left the cafe, I paused by the door, watching the wind swirl leaves down the quiet street, the lamplight catching them in a golden dance. The next morning at my desk, I found an envelope tucked under my keyboard. No name, no fancy stationery, just a simple note written in a familiar hand. Because of you, I never forgot what kindness looks like. There was no signature, but I didn't need one. I could almost hear Marvin's voice, warm and steady, reminding me that small acts of goodness ripple far beyond the moment they're given. As I watched the last golden leaves swirl past the cafe window, I realized some seasons end, but their warmth lingers forever. The chill of autumn may have closed one chapter of my life, but it opened another filled with unexpected warmth. Through quiet courage and a small, unnoticed kindness, I discovered that true worth isn't handed to you. It's something you claim by believing in yourself. Kindness, after all, has a way of finding its way back when we least expect it, like a steady light on a long, dark road. Maybe the greatest victories are the ones no one else sees, but that changes everything inside us.